If Chelsea were behaving like that, the media would paint it and say, well, they're just being street smart, they're just being savvy. When Forest try those tactics, you know, we're football terrorists.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and the antidote to football discussions, Football Terrorists. We're recording on Sunday the 5th of April, so we wish you a very happy Easter if you are celebrating, and we hope you enjoy your chocolate-flavoured, three-quarter sized, downsized, shrinkflationed Easter eggs. Coming up in today's show, we hear from a real football expert who commentates on the Premier League, international football and European games. We will explore the murky world of football finances and Forest's accounts. Our panellists will compete in a series of games in the hope of choosing their tricky tree tracks of their tiers, and Jeremy Davies will join us with the monthly Football Terrorists sketch. I'm your host, Rich Ferraro. I'm joined by the Marinakis in the Midlands, Tom and Baz. Welcome to another edition of Football Terrorists.
Football Terrorists.
Okay, so let's say hello to today's panel and give them an early chance to earn some points. So what is your suggestion to help Forest stay within the PSR limits? And I'm going to start with the aforementioned Maradona of the Midlands.
Hi, Rich. I'm taking inspiration from the Japanese fans at Wembley this week who famously cleared up their own litter after the match. Now, if everybody else at Forest did this, we could save them a few quid every week on cleaning costs and whatever. And just to stretch the environmental metaphor, I was thinking, how can we harness the power of the Trent, which is right next to the stadium? I was thinking maybe we could get some sort of wave power electricity generation going there to power the stadium. That's my suggestion.
I was slightly worried there when you said harness the power of the Trent following litter picking. You're just going to suggest we could just dump the rubbish bags straight into the river. It's just there.
No, that's right.
That'd be very so you get 3 points, 2 for good suggestions and a bonus 1 for environmental sustainability and responsibility. So congratulations to you. Let's move on. Baz, how would you help Forest stay within PSR limits?
No sustainability or responsibility. We just need to win the Europa League.
Oh, well, that's a very simple and effective suggestion. So you get 2 points for that, for being efficient. And last but not least, Tom Newton, what are your suggestions to help Forest stay within PSR?
Morning. I know it's going to be a long time, but just get the stadium done, just to get more people in it. And obviously you can
spend a huge amount of money on a massive infrastructure project. Okay, go on, tell me why it's going to work.
Because you can get more fans in and you can probably have like concerts and things like that and other events, which obviously put money in the Forest back pocket rather than how it is now.
Okay, right. Let's run with that one then in particular, because of course Tottenham, who are potentially in danger of going down to the drop, as much as Forest are, as much as West Ham are. I mean, they've got a problem, which is that if they get relegated, they're going to have an extra bunch of home matches to play. They're going to therefore have less time to be able to put on NFL matches and concerts. So, Tom, your plan is essentially contingent on Forest staying up, though, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we had like 20 odd years after the Premier League and everything. We've just been still playing catch up, and you go around the stadiums around the Premier League, and there's majority of them are a lot better than Forest, infrastructure wise, facilities, etc., etc. So yeah, I think hopefully this summer we'll get the green light and obviously expand the city ground and get more people in, because obviously there's a lot of people who can't get tickets for whatever reason, and while they're locked out, Forest aren't generating any extra revenue on that, are they?
Just very quickly, Tom, what would you do about the boat club?
build them a facility down the river just to shut them up, because obviously they're a bit uncomfortable at the moment, aren't they, putting crazy demands in and etc., etc. So yeah, hopefully they can all come together and have a decent agreement in terms of so everybody's happy at the end of the day. But first and foremost, I just want this new development to get the green light this summer.
Baz?
Just the only. So first of all, apparently Forest doubled their commercial revenue this year, which without expanding the stadium, so there is still potential even without it. The only thing that I'm not sure about with expanding the stadium is, and this sounds a bit snobby, but it's kind of like the whatever it was the Midtjylland game where they reduced the ticket price right at the end, and I was absolutely livid because it was a load of people who knew nothing about the game just moaning. And
I was just about to say, Maradona the Midlands, you managed to get a last minute ticket for the Midtjylland.
I did. I got one for free actually. So I didn't even pay any money for it.
And how you wish you hadn't.
And I wish I hadn't. I still wanted my money back after that. So, but no, I think that's a bit unfair. There's a lot of kids in that night who were around me.
The kids that I was surrounded by that were moaning.
Yeah, but it's okay if you've got a season ticket and you can go to every match. But there are a lot of kids there around me who that was their first ever match, and they normally never get the opportunity to go. So I think you've got to put aside your snobbery.
I mean, I completely understand that. Like, as people go more often, they'll understand what they're seeing a bit better, and hopefully the moaning will die down. But the idea of you just know that there's a big chunk of the extra 10,000, 20,000 seats are going to go to corporate know-nothings who pay, or tourists who pay ridiculous prices for those tickets.
It sounds like Sean Dyche, doesn't he? Wasn't he mentioning that on a podcast the other week, saying,
was he?
Yeah, people on mobile.
Oh my God! Right, I take it all back.
Yeah.
I thought it was just the keyboard warriors rather than people at the ground. But anyway, Maradona the Midlands. The thing with building a bigger ground, though, is Midtjylland showed, and of course there's an issue about pricing, but Midtjylland also showed that there can be football fatigue when there's lots and lots of matches. It won't always be possible to fill a bigger stadium. I mean, the advantage we have is that our stadium is currently compact, and therefore we know that Premier League matches, most of them, we can sell out.
Yeah, I mean, where the big stadium will come into its own is the games against Liverpool, Man United, those sort of teams where, quite frankly, you'll be able to sell 10, 12,000 tickets to away fans. That's the truth of the matter. And then you will get your tourists in and the sort of glory hunters for those matches. So you can charge sort of 50, 60, 70 quid. It's when the opposition isn't so glamorous that you're going to struggle to sell them. And the Midtjylland match would have been a sellout straight away if they just went from the off. It's 20 quid a ticket. There wouldn't have been any issue with sort of trying to flog the ticket to the last minute. It's because they pitched it at the same level as the previous matches. When the level of entertainment's been terrible all season, and fans had already seen Midtjylland once and felt shortchanged by the high prices charged for the previous Europa League games. So they just misread the room on that day. I think as long as they're in the Premier League, they'll still sell out a good half of the home matches anyway, and then that'll generate enough income or more income, which is vital really, because when you look at the even though we've got a record revenue this year, it's still dwarfed in comparison to people like Liverpool. So it's sort of theirs came up to something like 700 and something million pounds, which is about three or four times our revenue. So we're always on the back foot, and on the way the rules are and the laws are in terms of sustainability and profitability and all that sort of thing, it's just a necessity. You're going to have a bigger stadium to get as much money in as possible.
Baz, two things. Number one is we've just got our Porto tickets, and it seems as though the club have kind of gone from middle ground with the pricing on that one, doesn't it?
Yeah. Although, I was surprised at the price for them.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other thing is that I've alluded to this in previous podcasts, but when we went to the Liverpool match, you, me, and Mrs. Ferraro were walking past the stalls selling half and half scarves, and Mrs. F was suitably outraged. And it's unfortunately, as Maradona's just alluded to, tourists are an essential part of the football economy now, aren't they?
So last season when we played Manchester United, and I brought last year's season ticket with me instead of this year's, so I then had to watch Anthony Elanga's goal from the ticket office. The entire ticket office was full of Chinese people who didn't speak very much English, who'd obviously bought fake tickets and were wondering how to get in. Also, one of my favourite moments
A great
was
bunch of lads, though.
yeah, one of the guy who sits next to us. One game this season, he ended up sitting in his brother's seat, the other side, and there was some obviously a tourist sat in his seat, and he suddenly turns behind, leans behind him, and goes, "So I guess my brother sold his ticket then."
Yeah, and Tom, actually, there's a reality there, isn't it? Which is that the ticket exchange has been an invaluable innovation. I don't think anyone likes using Ticketmaster and these kinds of ticketing websites, but the ticket exchange means that uh, two things. Number one is if you've got a season ticket, you can get some credit back for the matches you can't go because it's a reality of life. Not everyone can go to every single match. And then number two is it means that the club can get bums on seats in those instances. And of course, those bums on seats, especially if they're tourists, are more likely to visit the club shop. They are more likely to buy a hot dog and a Madri, not Madri anymore, but you know what I mean, to spend some money, and that will add to the commercial revenue.
Yeah, definitely. But it's not just our club, is it? It's up and down the country in terms of the Premier League. It's like I watch the fan debate on Sky, and they're basically saying certain clubs don't like their season ticket holders because they're not putting as much in as, like you say, as the tourist fan. But like I says, it's hot football now, isn't it? If the game's being shown in like in the Far East, etc., or America, people want to go, etc. But there's a fine line, isn't there, for what the Premier League has become in terms of why do the tourist fans come is because of the atmosphere. But there's a danger that if you're pricing out your like fans who have been there since say day dot whatever in the last 30 or 20, 30 years, and you're pricing them out, the atmosphere is going to be sterile, isn't it? It's going to not be very enjoyable because it'd be dead in there, and that's the atmosphere is what has brought the Premier League to what it's become, kind of thing. So there is a danger of that happening in the next few years.
And Baz, I know you wanted to make a point, but also the whole thing about part-timers is that with Forest, because we've got a relatively small ground, it means that we have got a hardcore of 20 to 22,000 people who have experienced the last few years, like the ground really started filling up after the Marinakis takeover. So they've experienced the hope under Karanka and that being dashed. They've experienced the joy of seeing Forest kind of really unite under Sabri, and then that kind of falling by the wayside. They experienced the despair of COVID and Houghton, and then they experienced the unbridled passion and ecstasy of going up under Stevie Cooper and the roller coaster ever since. So there's a real community feel that you have from having those same 20,000 people forming the core of the crowd, isn't there?
Yeah, again, the guy who sits next to me, that entire period he's been sat next to me. It's been it used to be there was a period where I didn't know who would be sitting next to each season, and also that whole thing because of that. Again, the first Premier League season with Steve Cooper showed it best, where the singing was outstanding, the atmosphere was outstanding, and it made a difference, I think, to our points tally. The other thing I just wanted to say is I'm now going anti-Dyche, thankfully, and I'm all for a full stadium expansion because there are some clubs who have put in a rule where season ticket holders forfeit their season next season if they don't use it 5 times. I think Newcastle's one, Manchester United's another. So if you forget to put it on the ticket exchange 5 times, you lose your season ticket next season.
Ouch. Ouch. Okay, let's move on from that. Just so you know, Tom and Baz both have 2 points from that first round, and Married on the Midlands has 3. So a big hello to you if you are listening or watching Married on the Midlands, making money gestures. And so we're here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you're new here, this is the original Nottingham Forest podcast. We were established in 2008, providing match reports, weekly roundups, updates on the women's team, and much, much more. So you can visit 1865.football for links to our social media, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube channels.
1865.
Terrorists.
And it's time for a new game, Explain It Like I'm 5. So in this feature, we are asking our pundits to give us a 30-second briefing on a key topic that has been dominating the football news. And the first topic we have today is Married on the Midlands, and we're going to ask you to give us the lowdown on Forest's accounts, which obviously were published about a week or so ago. So you've got 30 seconds to do that, and that starts. Let's go.
Right. So on the face of it, it's a bit of a car crash. They've lost £71 million, which is a record loss. In terms of a normal everyday business, that's terrible. But in the world of football, it's not that bad. It's bare to middling. On the good side, they've increased revenue, as Baz mentioned, to over £200 million. But the bad thing is they've exceeded the £130 million losses allowed over the last 3 years. The main problem is lack of player sales.
Okay, thank you very much.
They've got to get that into 30 seconds.
Yeah, that was tight, and you did well. So congratulations to you. We'll award some points a little bit later on. So we're going to go over to Tom, who's going to tell us about Chelsea's recent run-in with the Premier League, leading to a big fine. So Tom, it's over to you, starting now.
As you've just said, you think it's a big fine. In Chelsea terms, it's a slap on the wrist, isn't it? It's pocket change to them. And the Premier League will never going to give them a points deduction because Chelsea as a product is valuable to the Premier League, and it's clubs like us and Everton who get the points deduction because we're not as big as Chelsea. So it's a little slap on the wrist, and they will carry on as they always are.
Thank you very much to you, Tom. And we'll talk a little bit more about all of these in just a few minutes. And that leads us to Baz. And Baz, you are going to give us the lowdown on the difference between PSR and squad cost rules, which are going to come in next season. Your time starts now.
So in the olden days, there were a few clubs who went bust because they spent far too much money and gambled on promotion and then lost out. So they went bust. So they brought in these rules, PSR, where you're allowed to make a certain size loss when measured over the course of 3 years. But they're replacing that now with squad cost rules, which are basically you're allowed to spend 85% of your revenue over a single year.
Okay. You did well to fit as much as you could into 30 seconds there.
Yes,
so
there's a lot more to say about it.
That was not an easy one to do. So straight away, I'm going to give 3 points to everyone for that because you all did really well in the time allotted. And I'm going to come back to you, Baz, because, yeah, squad cost rules. I think one of the key things to note there is that with squad cost rules, that's something that's already being applied in European competition. And there's every chance that Forest are going to breach the squad cost rules limit that UEFA impose, which is actually a bit harsher than the rules will be in the Premier League, isn't it?
Yes. So I did some reading up on this and it's all a bit dry and all that. But basically, what happens is at the start of the season, the club submits saying, we expect we're going to make £220 million worth of revenue. So the club is then allowed to spend on its squad, including paying off the manager, which is bad for us, 85% of that. unless you're in European competition, in which case, well, if you're in the Champions League, I think, in which case you're only allowed to spend 70% of that revenue. But then in theory, if you're in the Champions League, your revenue is going to be that much higher. So it equalizes it out. And that's because UEFA's rule is 70%, not 85%. The other thing to note is PSR is based on your actual accounts because it's calculated afterwards over the past 3 years, whereas the squad cost rule is based on a prediction. So if your revenue falls short, you can get punished for not meeting your prediction.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And you get an extra 2 points for that little explainer. Maradon the Midlands, I mean, we talked about you. We asked you to talk about Forest's accounts. A very simple thing to think about with Forest's accounts is that Forest don't necessarily need to spend as much money as they are doing, do they? And there's two things to think about. One is unnecessary player signings, and the other is unnecessary managerial outgoings.
Well, yes, there's both of those, but the big thing for me was actually that they've taken out external finance at high interest rates, which means that either Marinakis is unwilling or unable to keep on pumping money in sort of continuously every season to keep funding the excessive spending that we do.
Just for the benefit of our podcast listeners and watchers, I think the key thing there is that the Brennan Johnson finance, obviously payments into the club are amortized, and so you get it in installments. So Forest have paid a finance company to give them the money up front, but they're paying an extra, I think 3.4 million, something like that, in interest to receive the money up front. Now, there is an argument that that's down to the limits on what the club ownership are able to do in terms of converting equity into shares and all of that kind of money that they can put in. But yes, it does mean that there's an additional cost, obviously, in interest payments there.
And also, I mean, it just the sort of headlines are that we're sort of losing over £1 million a week just as an operating cost. And the other thing that really cost them in this year was the lack of player sales in that accounting period. So that sort of cements that the theory that we've got to be a selling club, really, sort of buying players, young players at a low price, developing them for a couple of years, and selling at least one of them on every year for a big profit. That's really the only sustainable model that would keep us within the limits every season. Because at the moment we're sort of breaching both the UEFA and the PSR Premier League rules as it stands. But there is the offset of if you do good spending, which is money spent on the women's team, the academies, the stadium infrastructure, that sort of thing, you can knock that down a bit. So I think we'll just about be okay this season, but maybe next season there could be another issue. I don't know yet.
The infrastructure stuff doesn't count for the new rules, so it's purely on wages and transfer fees and stuff like that.
So the increase in commercial revenue is going to have to be expanded to be able to account for that. Okay, and we'll come back to some of those themes a little bit later on. And then Tom, last but not least, that thing about Chelsea's recent issue. I mean, basically, they were paying unlicensed agent fees, and the argument is that because the American ownership reported the Abramovich regime when they took over the club and said, look, this is what we found, that they've not been given a sporting sanction for that. However, bearing in mind that the Premier League were rooting for Everton to get -15, and Forest, I think Forest they wanted -12, wasn't it? And as David Moyes said, as the current Everton manager, would you rather have a £10 million fine or a 10-point deduction?
Well, it's going to be the fine, isn't it? Because obviously 10 million, when you compare that to what you get in Premier League revenue, just being a Premier League club, it's like chalk and cheese, isn't it? But Chelsea are the kings of the loophole, aren't they? Didn't they sell their women's team, sold the hotel, and other bits and bobs, didn't they? So they're always trying to find a loophole. And it's like, whatever next, they're going to like trying to like sell a car parking space for like stupid amounts of money. But it's
Gianni Infantino's doing it.
Yeah. So, but it's just it's Chelsea. It's the punishment's minimal, isn't it, compared to us, where there was a distinct possibility that us and Everton were going to get thrown out the league because of the points deduction, and 10 million, like I said earlier, it's just a slap on the wrist, isn't it? So, but I've always said this, that the Premier League don't want clubs like us essentially in the Premier League, because obviously the commercial value is not as much as like your Man Cities and Chelsea's and things like that. So that's what it comes down to. God in the Premier League is protecting the Premier League brand, isn't it?
Baz?
I think the key, from what I understand of it, and I've only paid a bit of attention to it, key word was sporting advantage. So we got a points deduction, Everton got a points deduction because our breach gave us a sporting advantage over other clubs. Chelsea have been ruled to have gained a sporting advantage from these. So at the very least, I can understand why the current ownership might be aggrieved at getting punished for the previous ownership's actions when it was the current ownership that reported it. But if they gained a sporting advantage, every single thing they won under Abramovich should have an asterisk against it.
I was going to say, if we think back to, for example, Formula One have deleted championships for drivers and teams in the past when something has come up. So it means that there's no world champion for that particular year. Would it be that ridiculous to say that the trophies that Chelsea won during that time period should be deleted?
Certainly, it should be. Everyone should be aware that they won them by cheating.
Yeah. Well, as someone famous once said,
and I feel just on to take it to Man City as well. It's if you remember when Mourinho was in charge at Manchester United and he said coming second was his greatest achievement. That puts it all in a different perspective. The same thing. It's like, yeah, if you're up against cheats, then what are you going to do?
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out, isn't it, Tom, that in that time period, some really, really, I mean, the headline player was Eden Hazard, but some other Chelsea first team members were there who wouldn't have been if they'd stuck to the rules. And these, David Luiz, Ramirez, players who played a lot of matches and cost a huge amount of, like, we're talking sort of 60, 70 million in the days when that was ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah. So again, it's another sporting advantage because they've managed to sign these, let's say, better players or whatever, and they've obviously, what Baz has just said, they've managed to obviously fill their personal trophy cabinets with medals and this, that, and the other. But like I says, it always comes back to the brand of the Premier League. They don't want asterisks next to like a Man City or Chelsea, and hence why these clubs don't get punished, but we do in terms of the points deduction. And like you says, a point deduction is worse than a £10 million fine because of obviously the difference between falling out of the Premier League and staying in the Premier League.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, they can throw all their medals in the bin. Let's have a quick points update. So coming up in third place on 6 points is Tom. Baz is in second place on 7 points. And streaking ahead is the Maradon the Midlands on 9 points.
1865.
Terrorists.
Now it's time for part 1 of our football terrorists interview. Now, he might not have been on the podcast for a few weeks, but our very own Stephen Topless recently met TNT commentator Adam Summerton, who you might recognise from commentaries on Premier League games, international football, Serie A, and coverage of both the Europa and Champions Leagues. In an interview recorded last weekend before Spurs announced the departure of Scott Mills and then the BBC sacked Igor Tudor and replaced him, we heard Stephen, who started off by asking Adam about his very strong links to this part of the world.
I mean, you've got connections with Nottingham as well, haven't you? Sort of going back a few years. I mean, you just tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, well, I first came to Nottingham when I came to study in the city. I went to Trent University and studied broadcast journalism, graduated there around 2002, I think it was, and then briefly went back to the Northwest where I'm originally from. And then I'd met a girl while I was at uni who was from Nottingham, so always wanted to kind of come back, came back, and then we began to live together in the Nottingham area, ended up having children together. And I've just always stayed in the area. So yeah, I've actually lived in this part of the country now longer than I lived in the Northwest where I grew up. So I've got a bit of a split loyalty really there in terms of I never quite know these days where I'm from, if that makes sense, because it's like a kind of half and half. But yeah, obviously got lots of ties to this area now. I've had children in the area. One of my daughters plays for one of the local clubs. Yeah, I mean, in terms of my career, that was the East Midlands was where I really sort of cut my teeth in the newsrooms of stations like Mansfield 103 and Trent FM, Heart 106, which was Century. It's had a few different incarnations. Ram FM, Leicester Sound. I worked right across that patch when I worked in news before I did commentary full time. And the first team I ever covered was Mansfield Town and Hucknall Town as well at the same radio station. So yeah, but big affinity to the local area.
And through your work with TNT, it's come full circle. Obviously, you cover Notts County when they were in the National League, covering Forest now in Europe and the Premier League, and just talking through what a typical day for you would look like. So, for example, Forest are playing at the City Ground, you're broadcasting from there. What would your day look like, and what prep would you need to do going into a Forest game like that?
Well, the last Forest game, I think I did, if memory serves me right, was the Man City game around Christmas time. I think that was a lunchtime kickoff off the top of my head. So typically for a lunchtime kickoff, all your prep would have been done really the night before. You wouldn't really want to be doing too much, maybe just tidying up a few loose ends before you leave. And then you would leave for the ground at, I think I drove over there about sort of 9, half 9, get there in plenty of time, park up. And then you're chatting with people usually have a Winnebago up in the car park where all the people who are going to be on air are able to meet, and those who are on air are having things like makeup done. I usually swerve that, but the people, things like that. But yeah, I mean, and then you're into the game. But really, in terms of a commentary, a lot of the work is done on your own in the days leading up to it. You know, it can be quite solitary because it's usually just you and your laptop. You can be making phone calls as well, so you might be, speaking to people involved. That was something that was maybe more common when I would be covering lower levels of the game, like the National League, where the access to people would be that little bit easier than maybe it is in the Premier League. You could literally just make a couple of inquiries and get a manager's phone number pretty easily covering that level of the game, where it's a little bit more difficult as you go up the levels. No, I always think there's a duty of a commentator, as well as to call what is in front of you. I also think there's a responsibility and a duty to try and tell people maybe something they don't know. I think that's an important part of commentary as a whole, is to just to give people the benefit of that research that you're able to do that maybe they're not able to do, and thinking outside the box as well, and always evolving in terms of what research you do. And that can be statistical, it can be finding out more color pieces about a player. Like, for example, if I'm doing the Italian league, I'll go and translate foreign newspapers and things like that. It depends how busy it is, but sometimes you can be juggling 2, 3, 4 at an exceptionally busy week, even 5 games in a week. So you can imagine how much prep time that takes.
Let's talk a bit about Forest now then. And really, I think we just have to start by talking about what you've made of their season so far and where the club is at the moment, because it's been eventful to say the least.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's so hard, isn't it, really, to assess Forest season, because it's been pretty chaotic to say the least, hasn't it? And I remember talking in the summer about the recruitment that was being done, the investment that was being made, how exciting the season was for Forest, how you had so many existing players who were so good, and then came that situation with Nuno, and everything really else has flowed from that, hasn't it? And it's been oh my goodness, it's just been so chaotic. And I actually think when you look at the Forest squad, it should be pushing for Europe. I think if you look at the squad on paper, I still believe that, despite everything that's happened this season. But it's no surprise to me when you see the level of change and chaos and different styles and different types of people coming through the door, even the state of the situation above the manager level with the director of what is Edu's title? Is it global head of football or something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, even that sound, there seems to be, disruption there as well. So it's not been easy for the players in that respect. Obviously, new people coming into the building as well, and I think some of the new signings have found it difficult to settle. So I find it really almost impossible to assess it, because I mean, it's what parts of it do you cling on to in order to assess? It's just been total chaos, and what they do need undoubtedly is some calm, and if they can just get over the line, which I expect that they will do, and get safe, and then plan for next season. But I actually think some of the players who came in at the start of the season in the summer, those that remain, we might see more from them next season. Somebody like an Ndoye, for example, who scored for the Swiss a nice goal last night. I think there's a lot more to come from him. But in a way, I never thought they'd be fighting the drop, I have to be honest, this season. However, it doesn't surprise me that they've not got anywhere near the heights of last season when you consider the level of change and I suppose chaos as well that there has been this campaign. But it's mad, isn't it? There's still something massive to look forward to, despite all of that, in the latter stage of the season. The possibility of an All Midlands semi-final in the Europa League. I mean, that's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, and in your line of work, obviously you watch a lot of European football, and you'll see all of these different teams on the continent. Where does this Forest side stack up compared to what's left in the Europa League, and how far do you think that they can go in the competition?
Well, I think in terms of, if you're looking purely at the team on paper and you're not looking maybe at what's gone on behind the scenes and on the pitch right throughout the season, if you just look at it in isolation, I'd say they're right up there in terms of they've got to be challenges for the Europa League. I think the way we assess the Europa League probably has changed now in that the format has changed, in that we don't have Champions League clubs dropping into it who clearly skewed it somewhat. Now that it's just the same, the teams that are in it from the start will go to the end if they go on and do well in it. I think that has changed it, and maybe the competition is not quite as strong in the latter stages as maybe it would have been when you had the clubs dropping into it from the Champions League. So I've been covering Villa recently. I'm going to be going to Bologna to cover their quarter-final. And they for me are the favourites. I think they're the strongest squad on paper. But yeah, I think Forest are right up there, and it won't be easy in the next round, but it shouldn't be in the quarterfinals of a major European competition. But I think we've got a really good chance of an All Midlands semi-final, which would be quite the spectacle.
It would, yeah, and even more interesting would be if the worst was to happen for Forest in the Premier League. They get relegated, but go on and win the Europa League and have Champions League football in the Championship, which it almost seems bonkers to be talking like that, but it is a possibility, however distant. But yeah, bringing it back to the Premier League and Forest's situation there, you said you think Forest will stay up, and yeah, do you still think that they've got enough quality to get out of trouble, considering that they've got to juggle the Europa League alongside it?
Yes, I do. And I said after the Tottenham game that I felt it was one of the most significant, biggest results in Forest modern history. And I still stand by that. I think if they'd lost that game, particularly because of who the opponent was as well, I think the whole mood around Forest now would be so different. It would be one of real panic, I suspect. And now it's one of much more, not total calm, because the job isn't done. But I think that it wasn't just the fact that they got the result, nor the margin of victory, nor just the opponent. It was the way that they played as well. There was huge character shown. There was huge determination. Players like Murillo and Milenkovic, who I've sung the praises of, like many other people, for a long time now. I mean, they were absolutely outstanding in that game. Elliot Anderson is a tremendous footballer, fantastic player. these are good players. Sells was one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League last season. Williams, Aina, two of the best full-backs. I think this has all been forgotten a little bit in the chaos of the season that has unfolded. These players have not just become bad players overnight. Sometimes the way a team plays it's so reliant on the circumstances that they're playing in. And when you've got, when you go from the extreme of Nuno to Ange Postecoglou, then to Sean Dyche, we can't expect that to come without any price. You can't have that level of change without it affecting what happens on the pitch. And that's, I believe, what we've seen this season. I've never had any doubt that Forest have got excellent footballers. And hopefully Pereira will be the man to just get them over the line, because that's all this is about now in terms of the Premier League for Forest. It's just get over the line however you can. I felt at Tottenham, they produced the type of performance that said to me that this is not a team that's going to go down. Look at the difference between them and Tottenham in terms of attitude, application, organisation. It was complete night and day.
And just talking about Vitor Pereira, what are your thoughts on the job that he's done so far, and what do you think that he can bring to Forest in the longer term as well?
Well, I think in the short term, he's done a good job so far. Not all the results have been great, but if you look at their last 5 games, they've only lost the one. That was in Europe against Midtjylland, which they ended up turning around anyway. So it didn't really matter that result. The draw away at Man City was really impressive again. And I go back to talking about character. The Forest squad have shown an ability to fight and dig in and grind out a point like they did at Man City, which any side fighting the drop needs to have. So that for me was another really impressive point. Turning it around against Midtjylland, the victory away at Spurs, obviously for me is the biggest one of the lot. You look at his career and, he hasn't tended to stay anywhere too long, has he? He's had a degree of success in all the places that he's been. And you could even say that with Wolves, he had relative success in the short time that he was there, but he's also delivered trophies in other places like Greece and Portugal and China. I suppose he will look at it and I know he was really keen to come to the Premier League when he got the Wolves job. And I suppose he will look at this and think, look, I can take this on. I can now not just be the guy that saves Forest, but I can be the guy that really takes them forward. But as ever with Forest, it's incredibly difficult to assess what will happen there, because essentially it's on the feelings of one man, and that's it. And that's how that decision will be made. It'll be whether, Marinakis, who's worked with him previously, that was obviously, I think, a part of him coming in. It will depend on whether he feels he's the right man to take this project forward again, because having taken, such huge leaps forward last season, arguably a couple of years ahead of schedule, they've now gone backwards a little bit. It's now about getting back, going forward again, presuming they stay up, which I think they will. And it's about can Forest be a club now that pushes for Europe again next season? Obviously, the recruitment over the summer is going to be really key in that, and that's another reason why they have to sort out this situation with Edu at the top of the club as well, because a lot of the recruitment from last summer hasn't worked out. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, because they're not all bad players. In fact, a lot of them are very good players. But it did build quite a top-heavy squad. I think that was part of it, because there was limited opportunities for many of them. But I remember somebody in football saying to me once, recruitment is 90% of the job as a manager, 90% of it. And they've got to get that right in the summer. And I suppose as well, when you consider, the vultures are going to be looking at people like Murillo and Anderson, and, they might well go. They'll get top money for them if they do. And it's how they reinvest that money that's going to be so important. I'd love to see them keep hold of these players, but I think it's going to be difficult, because the amounts of money that are going to be offered as well are going to be eye-watering, I suspect.
Yeah, and I think it's a consequence, isn't it, of Forest's position. If you get the reported, let's say, 100 million for Elliot Anderson, that a club's not going to turn that down, as disappointing as it would be to lose a player like him.
Thank you to Adam Summerton for joining us on Football Terrorists. You can hear part 2 of his interview and more from our panel in part 2 of this podcast, which will be in your feeds adjacent to this one. Thanks for listening.
1865.
Football Terrorists.